The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Heale Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to have a chat with Ruby. Ruby's going to tell us all about her life. So, Ruby, if you could tell me where and when you were born, if you could describe what it was like where you grew up, the schools you went to, and the education that you received. So,
Hi,
over to you, Ruby.
So I was born in India. I am originally of Afghan heritage. So my family, everyone is from Afghanistan, and we are of Sikh faith. So we were a minority in Afghanistan. My parents had to flee in the late 80s to move to India, and then that's where my parents got married, and I was born in New Delhi. So we had a very, working class life over there. And then I don't really remember anything about it. All I remember is I remember bits and bobs where maybe I was like 2, and my dad used to do like trips abroad. He found work abroad, so he used to go to like Dubai and all of those and come back like after a few months, and then I wouldn't really recognize him because I was a little baby. And then when we were 3, we immigrated from India. We moved from here, and we I think went like through Bombay and made our way through Holland and eventually landed up in the UK. So I was 3 when I came to the UK. We originally moved to northwest London in Ealing. We lived there in a small council flat, like on the top floor of a council flat, and downstairs we had like also immigrants who were also living downstairs from a different part of the world altogether. And I lived with my dad, my brother, my mum, and we lived in like a 1-bedroom house, like a very small house. And then a year later, I lost my mum, unfortunately. So she passed away when I was 4. So at that time, obviously, we had no papers, no visa, anything of that sort. And then when my mum passed away, essentially, like I was 4, my brother was 7. So we had like social workers who got involved. We got moved from where we were living to a new area altogether. I went to a state school, so a normal public school where the predominant like 70% of the people over there were people of color, people who came from working class backgrounds, just like myself. My dad brought us up single-handedly, so he was the sole carer of us. He wouldn't work. He would only work on the weekends. So he used to go to, he'd do like a market stall on the weekends, and he'd sell like stereos and electronics and stuff like that. He started off by working for someone else, and then he eventually, made some money and opened up his own store in the weekend markets. And then on the weekdays, he would take care of us and, just take us to school and stuff. Growing up, I was like, I had so many social workers. So I went from social worker to social worker to social worker. By that point, like by the 10th social worker, I didn't even remember their names anymore. It was like, okay, yeah, like it's fine. When I went to school, I was a very average kid. So because you have to think about it this way, like for me, firstly, there wasn't just the cultural, it was I came from a very particular culture. I immigrated to the UK. And then on top of that, I lost my mum very young. And then my dad had depression. It was undiagnosed for like 20 or so years. He just didn't get any help at all to experience the death of my mum. And it wasn't even, he got married to her. He had a love marriage. So it wasn't even an arranged marriage. It wasn't like, because back in Afghanistan in those years, like you'd get married, you wouldn't even see what your wife looked like or your husband looked like. You'd find out on the wedding night, oh yeah, this is what my husband looks like. But for my dad, he fell in love with my mum at literally 17. She was 15. They got married when my dad was like 21 and she was 18, 19 in India. So for him, he lost the love of his life in a completely foreign country where he had no money, nothing. 70% of his siblings were in India at the time, no one to support him. He was completely alone. Eventually, my aunts and uncles came. They also immigrated, and, my family started chipping in to take care of me and my brother. But my dad self-medicated with alcohol for much of his life, like for, 90% of his healing journey, he self-medicated with alcohol. So I had a lot of that growing up. I had a lot of going to school. All my teachers would know, like, what my story was. They'd all know, okay, yeah, this is Ruby. This is where she's come from. This is what she's witnessed as a child. So I'd always be on the register of, this child needs to be taken care of extra. But studies-wise, like I never really had any dreams and ambitions at that age, like say 8, 9, that, oh yeah, I'm going to be something or I'm going to do something. However, at a very, very, very young age, I started resorting to reading. I turned to books, essentially, as a form of escapism, because my childhood was so adverse. There was so, many issues that I faced where I'd have like my school friends going on picnics, going to each other's house for sleepovers, and I'd be at the hospital by my dad's side, hoping that he didn't overdose himself this time. Like, it wasn't easy. It wasn't the best, essentially. So I started reading books, and I started finding comfort in them, finding comfort in a different universe altogether, a different reality, a different, just being able to escape the pain for a while. And essentially that's how my love for reading and books began. And then obviously that resulted in, my career right now, which I guess we'll discuss eventually.
Yeah, we'll come on to that. Right. Let's have because, okay, your parents' mother tongue, is that Pashto? Is it Dari? Or is it one of the Indian dialects or
So
languages?
it's a very particular language. It's called Hindko, and it's a mixture of Hindi, Punjabi, and Pashto. So we have like phrases of Pashto in there. We have phrases of Hindi. We have Punjabi. But if someone were to speak Pashto, they would not understand what we're saying. Maybe someone who is speaking Hindi might be able to get bits and bobs of what we're saying, but it's a very particular language. Hindko is like, it's a dialect that's spoken in a part of Pakistan as well. So the part of Pakistan that's bordering with Afghanistan, a lot of people speak Hindko there. And essentially the minorities, Sikhs and Hindus, they both speak this language of Hindko. There's various different dialects of it. So if you're from Kabul, you speak a different dialect. If you're from Jalalabad, you speak a different, and so on. But the core language is the same. My dad is fluent in Pashto. He's fluent in Farsi. He's fluent in all those languages because that's what they were taught when they grew up. However, when we immigrated to India, they held on to their mother tongue, which was Hindko, and that's the language that I speak at home. Yeah.
That was the next question I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Were you brought up speaking by language? So
Yes.
the answer to that is yes.
Not even bi-language. I'm multilingual. So Hindko is my primary, it's my mother tongue. However, I grew up on watching, I'm not sure if you're familiar with these, but these are Indian soap operas. There's this very famous channel called Star Plus, and I've grown up watching Hindi soap operas for much of my life. So not a single person in my family speaks Hindi, but like as with each other, but we are all fluent in it. I am completely fluent in Hindi because of the fact that I've watched all these shows, and I've watched Bollywood for much of my life. Like I spent most of my childhood watching Bollywood and Disney Channel. I'm not completely familiar with Hollywood at all, just Bollywood and Disney Channel. That's it. So yeah, I speak Hindko, I speak English, I speak Hindi, and then I understand Punjabi. I can't really speak it much because Punjabi is a very, very complex language. So yeah, I can understand it when it's in its very basic sense, but when it gets really complex, I don't understand it much. And then Urdu is a bit similar to Hindi. It's a different kind of like dialect, I guess. But yeah, I can speak Urdu as well. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So where did you start learning English then? If you were speaking this I can't even pronounce it.
Hindko, yeah.
Hindko.
I'm not sure.
If you're speaking that at home, and you were 3 or 4 when you arrived here.
Yeah.
Where did you pick the English up? Because your English is much better than mine.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've lived in Hayes, which is northwest London, and for most of my teenage years, my English was very ghetto, very, like how we speak over here. But then I went to university and it kind of just changed, I guess, my dialect. But yeah, so in terms of English, I was a very shy child at school. So when I started nursery, so I started nursery here essentially, and I went to year 1, year 2, everything, and I feel like I was just very, very small and shy, and I probably didn't speak to anyone. But just like with the Hindi, you learn when you see people speak English. So I guess at some point I picked it up, and then because I had my brother too, we both live in the same house together, we spoke to each other in English. So when I'd come home, we would speak in English to each other and speak to my dad in our mother tongue. So maybe that over time resulted in me speaking English. I don't remember the exact moment that I started speaking, but what I do know is maybe I was in year 2 and I was fluent, like by year 2. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess if you're learning that from a very early age, you're like a little sponge anyway, and it's just mimicking all the time. So yes.
Yeah.
So growing up around Hayes, that area, then. So that was just trying to think. There was Bend It Like Beckham, that film.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yes.
I think that was kind of around that area as well.
Yes, it was in, I think, Ealing, yeah, which is very close
Yeah.
to me, yeah.
So it's just around the corner. So and she was Sikh.
Yes,
The
she
girl
was.
that played in that,
Yeah.
Jess. So
Yes.
that's. Did you see
Yes.
any of that going on as you were growing up? Because that'd be.
Yeah, I mean, from what okay, so it's the way her dad were very, very typical of Asian parents, brown parents.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're completely like that. When it comes to them wanting to uphold these particular values, stick to their culture, try to make you a traditional, they say Indian girl who studies and follows the rules and then eventually gets married and so on. And that was very prevalent, and it still is very prevalent in my culture, this idea that guys don't really get the same girls don't get the same freedoms and opportunities as guys do. However, in the last 10 years or so, especially with the new Gen Z that's come around, they're able to make their own decisions. It makes me a little bit sad as well, because I'm like, I wish when I was a teenager I had those opportunities to be able to like I wasn't allowed to go on sleepovers to my friends' houses. I wasn't allowed to stay out till late. I wasn't allowed to go clubbing. There were so many things that were available to my brother. He could come home at 11 o'clock and there would be no issue. But for me, it wasn't allowed. And it wasn't until I graduated from university that I was able to go on my very first girl holiday. Like, my dad was like, "You're not allowed to go on holiday. Just the girls, just by yourself." And since then, you best believe I have gone on multiple holidays, because the moment I was allowed, I was like, okay, I'm going on holiday. Like, I'm going on holiday, which is why when COVID happened, I was so sad, because I wasn't able to travel as much. But, there were so many things I missed out on, that the moment that I had the opportunity, I don't know why my dad felt that at 21, it was okay for me to make those decisions. But at 18, it wasn't. I don't know. Maybe, his mindset was different. I'm not sure. But yeah, so I wasn't allowed to do most of the things that the men could do. But I also know that there were other people who were. I had girl mates from the same community as me who went on holidays, who wore what they wanted, who did what they want. They like, it really, varies from family to family, and values to values, essentially. So at the moment, my partner, his family is a lot more liberal than mine is. So, like, with me, my dad, there's a lot of things that I'm still not allowed to do. Whereas in his family, that's not prevalent. Like, that's not how it is. But we both came here at the same time. Like, we both came here when we were 3, for over 20 years. And there's a lot of things. And I guess it just depends on also the values that you had when you were back home. So my dad was from a different part of Afghanistan. His family was from a different part. So I don't know. I think often, I don't blame them in a way as well, because these are people who come from a culture where his sisters got married to men they had never met at like 16. So then for him to be even comfortable with me going on a holiday by myself, wearing what I want, was like a humongous deal. It was like, how do I say that this is okay? But now he knows that it is okay. And it's just about finding that balance between your culture and accepting Western culture, and just finding that balance. Like, you don't want to let go of your values completely, your cultural traditions completely, but you don't want to hold on to those restrictive, those traditional, those constricting values either, because that doesn't allow anybody to grow at all. So
Yeah, that's interesting about the cultural side of it, and because the bit I know about Hindi, not Hindi, about Sikh, is they like a good festival. I mean, Diwali, the festival of light. I mean, inviting people into that, and I've been to a couple of those in the past, and they're great fun. For me, I'm kind of Church of England, so I'm not one of the old Hatcham, Matcham, Dispatcham types. I mean,
Yeah.
only go to church for a wedding or a christening or a funeral.
Yeah.
But I guess that it's a totally different cultural thing for Sikhs, for Muslims, for Catholics. Their experience of their religious life
Yeah.
is. So how was that for you growing up? Were you able? I mean, did you go to? I don't know what they call them.
It's the Gurdwara.
Good.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Terrible with names.
No worries. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So were you there religiously, regular, or because
Yeah.
your dad was having problems when you were growing up?
Yeah.
Was that a big part of your life?
So, because of all the personal issues that we had going on, my dad he wasn't very religious because of everything that happened. So he was cultural, like he upheld the tradition, he wore the turban, all of that. But in terms of God and everything, I think for a short while he probably just didn't believe in God at all. He'd still listen to prayers. He'd still, we have a photo of the Sikh gurus in our house and everything. But I feel like for a short while he was probably, on a different path altogether. However, my dad's sisters, his brothers were here. So on the weekends when he would go to markets, I'd always be at his sister's house, and she had 4 children of her own, and two of their kids, 2 of the younger kids were the same age as my brother and me. So on the weekends, we'd always go to the Gurdwara. She'd take us on Saturday and Sunday. We were enrolled into Sikh Punjabi speaking and writing class as well. So yeah, the Sikh language. So we'd go every weekend without a fail. However, the older I got, the more difficult it was for me to go there every weekend. The good thing for my brother was that he actually was enrolled into a Sikh school. So he went to a Sikh high school, whereas I didn't. I went to a different high school. So for him, he continued with his Sikh studies because in his Sikh high school, every morning they'd have prayers. Like every single morning, there's a small gurdwara in the actual school, and then Sikh studies was a compulsory subject. Sikh Punjabi language is a compulsory subject. Learning, speaking, writing, all of that was very compulsory. But for me, unfortunately, because I stopped going every weekend to my aunt's house, and we lived in West Drayton at the time, which was very far from the gurdwara. I wasn't able to continue with it, unfortunately. So I can't read or write Punjabi. My brother is fluent. He can speak, write. He's been trained and everything, but that's because he went to a Sikh school, so he was able to continue it there. In terms of like other things, my dad didn't really push us much because of everything that was going on in his personal life. Like religion was never a priority, unfortunately. Healing was, moving on from everything that we'd undergone and experienced was. Even now, like where I on my own accord started praying. So I got so you can get Sikh holy books that are translated in English. So it's written in Punjabi on one side and it's written in English on the other side. So obviously I can't read the Punjabi, so I started reading the English side, and I started teaching myself how to pray on my own accord. So when I when I was 18 and stuff, and I got my first car and so on, I just decided to drive myself to the Gurdwara, take myself. So I made that own decision to go to the Sikh Gurdwara, pray, and be as in touch with my religion as I could. However, we're not practicing Sikhs, we're not baptized. So, when you get baptized Sikhs, they actually wear turbans, like women and men wear turbans. They don't do anything to their hair. They don't, get their eyebrows done, waxing, threading, cutting hair, none of that. However, I do get my eyebrows done and everything. I do wax, a thread, all of that. So, there's a lot of things in terms of baptized Sikhs don't eat meat. We eat meat. So there's a lot of differences in that respect. I wouldn't say I'm religious. I would definitely say that I do believe in a God. I believe in God. I believe that there's a lot of teachings within the religion that I've been brought up with that align with my own values and stuff. But I feel like had things been different and had our experiences not been as adverse as they were growing up, if my mum was there, I know that I would have been a lot more religious, for sure.
Yeah. So let's just have a quick look at let's just take you back to school. And what was your secondary school like?
So
different from your brothers.
So the issue is that my brother actually, So we lived in Hayes, and my brother was enrolled in this particular school, which wasn't a Sikh school. So he started year 7 in this, standard normal school. However, he was bullied because of his turban. So in year 7, he was very badly bullied. And because of this experience that he had, we made a meeting with the Sikh school, which was just down the road, because it was very hard to get into that school. So we made a meeting, and my dad spoke to them, and he was like, look, my son's very badly bullied, and, we want him to be enrolled in your school. So then he was, as a result, enrolled in that school. However, usually when your brother or your sibling is going to that school, you're automatically you're given priority to be able to go into the school. But I don't know what it was. Like my dad, I don't know whether he was drunk and he forgot to fill out the form. I don't know what it was. But here we were at the end of my year 6, and I did not have an application for the school. So then my school was just like, okay, you know what? We're going to have to enroll you into whichever school is able to take you, because now it's too late to be enrolled into that school.
Yeah.
They have no spaces left. They've given everything out. So even if your brother goes, hey, unfortunately, you're not going to get a space. So then I was enrolled into the nearest school that was available, which was this school called Swakely's School for Girls. So it was a girls' school. And that was literally the only school left. There was nothing else. Now the school is very good. It's an academy. They make you do a test when you go in. It's doing really, really well. But this is like 15 years ago. So when I went, it was a standard school, predominantly mixed race, people of color. In my class, we'd probably have like 70% would be people of color, 30% would be, white. And yeah, that's it. Like our teachers were the same as well. Most of our teachers, we wouldn't see as much representation in terms of the teachers, because at that time, I don't think there were many people who were like first-gen immigrants who had become teachers. And, now we have a lot more people of color teaching and all of that. But yeah, at that time, very, very people of color, working class, standard, very, very standard. There was not, I don't feel like I was always motivated to study to my highest degree, or I felt like I had a lot of opportunities available to me going into a state school. I just felt like, okay, yeah, go to school, study, go home. And at home as well, there was never dad didn't sit us down and say, okay, homework time and all of that. So homework was on our own accord. Everything was on our own accord. I went to school when in year 11 I came out with standard grades, A's, B's, C's. But it was when I went into sixth form that I decided to change my life around, because I was like, I understand that I'm in a state school, and I understand there's not many opportunities available to me because of my circumstances and situation. However, it doesn't mean that it ends there. I've got my entire life ahead of me. And there was this other girl who really, really inspired me. She was my classmate. I had known her since year 7, and she was also Afghan, but she was Afghan Muslim. She had experienced a lot in her life as well. She'd, gone through hell in her personal life, but she was so studious. She was so motivated. She was like, I'm going to, go to Oxford University. I'm going to study law. I'm going to make something out of my life. And she had come out with all A stars and A's in school. And I looked at her and I was like, if she can do it, despite everything she's undergone, why can't I? So when I went into sixth form, that's when I made a decision myself that I'm going to get a degree, go to a really, really good university, and change my life around. And it was all on my own accord. It was my own, it was like, I was like, I'm going to study. And then I came out of sixth form. I came out with 3 A's and a B. I went to UCL. I studied philosophy, and then I did my master's as well. But that was all, it was on me. I had to just kind of make the best of the situation that I had, and yeah, just kind of motivate myself to study and get a good degree. Yeah.
Well, I've actually found that, so during my time in Afghanistan, the little contact that I did have with women over there, and particularly on my middle tour, when I first went to Helmand. Oh, just take you back when I was in Kabul. I did quite a bit of work down at the Lawyer Jirga, which was a big countrywide conference, for want of another word. And there was a woman speaking there who was a real inspiration, and I had the opportunity to interview her for the ISAF News. I then met her in 2006 in Helmand, and I think she was a local councillor that was working down at the Women's Centre in Lashkar, and she was able to come into. We brought her and a few other ladies into the camp. A fair amount of secrecy going on about it around the whole operation, but they came in and they recorded a couple of episodes of what we called the ISAF news. But it seems that females from Afghanistan tend to have this instilled belief in themselves and this drive to be able to better themselves with all the adversity that they've gone through, and the fact that women were allowed to vote. They got the vote in Afghanistan, and there was, I think, almost 100% turnout that who were eligible to vote in Afghanistan, which was amazing that they've got that. And I think you've probably inherited that mentality from your Afghan roots.
Yeah, I guess so, because these are women whose mums and grandmas had a lot more freedom than they did. Like pre-war Afghanistan, pre-revolution Afghanistan was such an open, a modern country where women were allowed to wear skirts, dresses. The hijab wasn't compulsory. They were able to work and they were able to do everything. They were able to enjoy all the freedoms that come with just being, human, essentially. And probably, and their mums and grandmas and great grandmas had that freedom, and to have that taken away from you, during war and revolution, it probably pushed them even further and said, no, like we're gonna make the best of this situation that we can. And I feel like, life doesn't give you a second chance. Like when my dad talks about how he escaped and how he fled, he was like, I literally, there was a helicopter, it was off the ground, and I had to run towards it and kind of jump to flee. And the way he talks about it is literally like, there's bomb blasts going off everywhere, there's, everything is all over the place, and you're literally trying to flee to save your life as best as you can, and then come back for your family, find a way to come back for your family and take them with you. And when you get a chance to be able to better your life, you have to. So even now, like with everything that we experienced and stuff, my dad at this point in time has, touched with, like recovered, healed. He's reached a point in his life where he takes care of himself, he takes care of us, he takes care of everyone, because you get to a point, Tim, where you're like, I can't keep fighting for the past. The past is no longer there. I have to just make do with what I have. When he eventually got diagnosed and when he, received medication and help for himself, he really wanted to make a change. He really wanted to change his life around. He joined the gym. He started taking care of his health. And I always told myself that, I'm going to face whatever adversity I have and make the best of my situation. And when I wanted to start studying, when I said, okay, I'm going to go to university and everything, it's for me, because if I didn't do it, it wasn't going to impact anyone but me. I was going to end up getting married young and, living with probably an abusive husband. Who knows what my life could have been like had I just not taken a chance to better myself and be the person that I am today. And I really, really believe in it. I feel like, often we make excuses for our actions and for our current present self and say, oh yeah, my life is this crap because of everything that's happened to me. But you have to use your past as a way to change your present and your future. And that's what I see it as.
So the only thing you can do with the past is learn from it.
Learn from it.
You can't change the past. You have to learn from it, and you can influence what you do with the future. And it looks like that you sort of grabbed it by the horns and jumped on and gone with it. So well done for that. So sixth form.
Yes.
You worked really hard to turn yourself round. You got a place at UCL.
Yes.
University College of London. What did you study?
I studied philosophy. So not the typical, science, medicine, law that you could expect from a brown person. I studied philosophy. Yeah. I was just really interested in it. I just loved the way it made me think outside the box. It was so inspirational. My teacher was so inspiring, and the subject, the topic, it enthralled me. And I knew that this is all I want to study. And I studied at university.
So how long was you studying that for?
So I studied for 3 years. I studied philosophy for 3 years. And then, as you know, we'll go into later, I guess, but I wanted to be an author. So in like every summer while I was doing my philosophy degree, I was working on my novel manuscript, my young adult fiction book that I was writing. When I graduated 3 years later, I said, okay, let me get a stable job, and then I will, you know, this is my backup job, and then I will write my book, finish my book, and then publish it. So I decided to do a PGCE, so like a teacher training course. Started that at King's College London, and 3 months in I just realized how miserable I was because I wasn't following my true calling, which was to write books, and I really wanted to write books. But what are the odds of a brown girl like me, who's out from Afghanistan, such a minority within a minority, had so many adverse experiences, to even get a book published? Like, that wasn't going to happen. But then I told myself that if that's the mentality that I'm going to adopt, then I'm going to be unhappy for the rest of my life. So then I decided to, 3 months into my PGC, I decided to leave it, and I decided to go back to my part-time job, which was working next retail on the weekends, and finish my book. And then I went back to study philosophy the following year. I decided to do my master's in it. And this was while I was building my platform, my social media platform, writing and working on my manuscript. I just needed to give myself time. I was like, what makes me really happy? Philosophy. I've always wanted to do a master's. So I was like, I'm going to do my master's and continue studying it. So I went to King's College London, back to King's College London, and did my master's in it. And I worked on my writing on the side. Yeah.
So, what do you hope to gain from a master's in philosophy?
Okay, so if
What
you
sort of
study,
job could you go forward with
so
a degree in philosophy?
for me, I always wanted to be an author. So studying philosophy was not for this is a means to an end for me to get this job. I feel like the only reason why now, right, the only reason why you should go to university is either because you really love the subject and you want to learn, or you want to make a career. If you want to make a career, do law, science, medicine, so on. Those are, pharmacy, those are take you to a particular path. And if you really love the subjects, that you really love art, fine art, you really love history, those particular humanities is never going to guarantee you a job in that field. Like, what could you study? Like you can't really, what could you be? Sorry, you can't really, there's no specific job to be after you do humanities. You can do humanities and end up being a lawyer. Like, there's no direct correlation.
Yeah.
So I studied philosophy for the sake of studying philosophy, because I really loved the subject. That's why I studied it, because I already had in my mind what I wanted to be. I wanted to be an author. Philosophy would open my mind further. There were so many theories, there were so many things that I could use in my writing, and even till this day my mind is open in a different way altogether, and I use all those things that I learned in philosophy and incorporate it in my words. So for me, it was just about learning. It wasn't about, because I already knew in my head what I wanted to do.
Now that's something that a lot of people really don't know what they want to do.
Yeah, I guess.
So,
And it's okay. Yeah.
so having the ability to know what you want to do and then go for it, which is pretty good. So, philosophy.
Yes.
I don't know an awful lot about philosophy.
I can.
Maybe I do because I don't understand it. I think that's the problem with it. I probably don't understand what philosophy is all about in the first place.
So
So
yeah.
can you enlighten us a little bit what philosophy is about and yeah.
Yeah, let me go back 10 years to my degree. So I graduated, well, not 10 years. Yeah, I started, started studying at 18, graduated by 21. So yeah, around 7 years. So essentially, philosophy asks the big questions. So you have these basic things where with science you have a specific answer, or you have a way of getting to the answer. With science, psychology, all of those, if you have found out that there's this particular infection out there, what you need to do is you need to test various chemicals and so on, try and find how you can try and find an antidote to it, to this particular infection, or you try and find out how things work. With philosophy, we ask why. Like, why does this happen? Why does this work the way that it's working? Why do we exist? As opposed to how do we exist? How do we exist? people who, believe in evolution, we exist through evolving, Darwin's theory of evolution, the Big Bang theory helps explain how the universe came about, so on. So those are the how things happened, how atoms work, how molecules exist, how the planets exist, how we, how the solar system works. We ask the why. Why did, for example, the Big Bang happen? That's not a question that I've ever studied, but so why? So why do I have consciousness? Why do I believe that I am a person when I am talking to you? Where does this I come from? Is this I a person? Is this I a brain? Is this I this clump of consciousness that can come out of me the moment that I pass away? Or am I a body and a brain? In that case, if I am a body and a brain, when I pass away, that means nothing else comes out of me. That's it. I am dead, right? If I am just a brain, that means if my brain was taken out of my body and put into another person's body, that means that person would be me. Now, if I'm a clump of consciousness, if I'm just this little, then why is this attached to my body? And where does it go when it comes out? It's things like that. So that's one idea, the personal identity crisis. Then you have ethics, the idea of what is morality, what is right, what is wrong. So I'm sure you've come across the trolley problem. If you had a trolley going across a rail track, all you had to do was press a lever and those 5 people wouldn't die, but that one person would you pull the lever? And then they're like, oh yeah, I would, because I would save the 5. Why are 5 lives better than the 1? And then that results in more problems. Then there's like an alternative to the trolley problem where it's like, oh, okay, what if you didn't have to press the lever or something like that? So that it's morality, essentially, ethics. Then you have the philosophy of politics. So where do political theories come from? Socialism, Marxism, they're all theories. Politics is based on theorizing what an ideal state would look like, what an ideal way of living would look like, what an ideal society, what the economic state would look like, what a utopian state would look like, and then they base the practicalities from that and they go forth. And then you have the philosophy of history. So you have like, historically these things happened, where did they come from, why did, so on. And then you have the philosophy of art, where art and history are so linked, art and politics are so linked. So what kind of message was this particular art displaying? There's a lot of facets of philosophy. There's the philosophy of medicine. So like, when you're diagnosing people with depression and so on, there is an actual philosophy module on whether diagnosing people in this way is correct or this way. Why do we use this particular diagnosis and so on? So philosophy is literally it's the kind of subject which asks us to step out of the box and stop accepting the status quo. Why should we accept this? What is the reason for it? Think for yourself. Essentially, just think for yourself. And that's the easiest way I could summarize it. Like, there's also philosophy of literature, there's philosophy of everything. You can study the philosophy of everything, and all these modules are incorporated in the degree, essentially. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's really interesting.
That's explained a huge amount.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm impressed.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot more. I would have had more knowledge had we asked 20-year-old me who was actually studying the subject at the time, but yeah, that's the most I remember anyway.
That's good. So it's all about questioning.
It's all about questioning. Yeah.
All about questioning. I love that.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing now. I'm philosophizing on you. I'm questioning you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, religion is a philosophy of life as well. When you think about it, like religions try to, like, obviously, I don't really agree with religions as such as the theoretical aspect of like so for instance, with Christianity, Islam, anything, the idea is that they're trying to put moral values. This is morally right. This is morally wrong. That's ethics, which is philosophy. You're trying to tell us what is right or wrong. When it comes to, say, abortion, euthanasia, they have their own lists of what's okay to do. They also have their lists on how to live. They also have politics incorporated in them. How to live, how to be the ideal person, what does existence look like? Are you a spirit? Are you a soul? Is there life after death? All of these questions are considered in philosophy. All of these questions are raised, answered, theorized. And for me, that's probably why I was very intrigued by religion after I studied philosophy, because I was like, essentially what religions were trying to do was create this like all-encompassing philosophical theory of how to live. But then years and years and incorporation of culture and this and that, it just got very distorted. It just got very, very messy. But it started with a question, and it was why. why is existence here, I guess. Yeah.
Terrific. Right. Let's you've always wanted to be an author.
Always.
So what's your first book about?
Okay. So essentially, I wanted to be an author for young adult fiction books. So, teenagers, young adults, and I wanted to write stories. However, that took a U-turn. So I wanted to write books because I wanted to be, I saw myself as being a novelist one day. But then when I turned 21, I left my teacher training course, as we spoke about earlier, and I went back to my retail job. In the process, I had a few adverse experiences. I had my heart broken, unfortunately. So then I decided to create a particular, and this is 21-year-old me, lives in a little bubble and all of that. So I really wanted to heal from those particular experiences. I really wanted to stop hurting, because my mum's loss was one that I couldn't feel as a 3-year-old, but this loss was so deep. It was so strong that I felt like I was genuinely losing someone all over again. I was genuinely experiencing death, and it triggered so many emotions in me, so many, my past, everything. I thought, this is the cherry on the cake. This is probably just God playing at me. He's laughing at me. He's telling me, I've given you this to deal with, and now you deal with this as well. But I wasn't going to back down. And it was the darkest year of my life, but I decided to create an Instagram page and share my writing online, essentially. So I started sharing writing about like feelings and emotions and self-love, healing, depression, all of that. So really, really heavy, hardcore, deep topics. And within 6 months, the page just grew. At the same time, I'm working in my part-time job, I'm writing my novel manuscript, and I'm doing this, and my page just blew up. It went from 500 to 5,000 to 20,000 followers. And then it went to 50,000 followers. And then my readers were like, we want to read a book of this. We want you to publish this book. So I decided to self-publish my very first book, which was a micro poetry book. So that's when the Insta poetry scene was like really prevalent. So we had so many Insta poets. We had Rupi Kaur, we had R.H. Sin, R.M. Drake. There were so many people doing so well at the time. They're still doing very well. So I decided, okay, let me self-publish. And then when I self-published my very first book and it did really well, I was like, oh, this is really good. I can build myself a portfolio of books that have done really well, and then eventually I can, get an agent and publish my novels. This is great. However, the novels have always been a selfish dream. They've been a dream for me. This is what would make me very happy. But the more that I wrote about these very heavy laden topics, I realized that I didn't have to write for just myself. I could write for other people. Growing up, books had been a form of escapism for me. And I thought going into a book, reading a story was a very good way to escape reality and feel better. And that, that's great. But then when I started writing about all these very, very heavy topics, I realized that writing doesn't need to be an escape. It can also be a solution. It can also be a path to healing. It can also be a way to coming to terms with what you're experiencing. And I decided to be very vulnerable. I decided to be very, very vulnerable with my words. I spoke about mental health, grief, depression. I spoke about happiness, attachment. There were so many things, loneliness. And the more that I received messages from my readers saying, Ruby, I felt alone up until this point. Ruby, I didn't think that someone else understood how I was feeling. Ruby, today I was going to do something absolutely horrifying, but your words stopped me. And I was like, I need to never stop writing this. I need to never stop sharing this content with the world. If it has the ability to change at least one person's life, I will do it. Because my fiction writing was to change my life. It was to change me and make me happy. But these words were changing people's lives. They were impacting people. And that's when I found my purpose. And my purpose became changing the world one word at a time, helping people on their healing journeys one word at a time. I started writing articles for lifestyle health, mental health websites, magazines, online magazines. I started a blog, started a monthly newsletter. I started appearing at I appeared at the Science Museum, Trafalgar Square, went to poetry nights, performed all these pieces. I went back to my school. I did a mental health workshop. I decided that it wasn't just about the writing anymore. It was about making a change in the world. If I have changed someone's life, if I have stopped them from doing something, incredible to themselves, or if I have shown them that their past doesn't define their future, then I've served my purpose. I've lived a fulfilling life. And I also did like a short skit of working in children's services part-time while I was writing, because as an author, as an artist, it's very hard to make a living from your writing from the get-go. Like it's just not possible as an artist to do that. You always need a side job. So when I went and I worked in children's services, for much of my life, I had been on child in need plans. Growing up, I had been on a child protection, child in need plan up until, I went to high school and year 10, year 11. And now I was on the other side. I was holding these conferences. I was organizing these child protection conferences. And I saw so many of the same patterns. People who, have been brought up in poverty or working class or with an alcoholic father end up finding an alcoholic partner, end up going into drugs. And they just constantly, it was the same cycle, same pattern. Mum, got pregnant at 16, you're going to get pregnant at 16. Like, they just didn't feel like there was anything more to life. Like, abusive dad, abusive husband, abusive brother. No, like, then I realized that people felt like they had to stay in these cycles. They can't break away from that cycle. And I was a living example of having broken away from that cycle of finding myself in such a difficult situation, thinking that I couldn't be what I wanted to be, and now making a career out of writing about healing, which no one in my community had ever done before. So then I told myself that I'm going to, trying my best to inspire people to break out of that cycle. Working class people, people of color, people who find themselves in, drugs, alcohol, anything. And I was going to try and make a change through my words as best as I could. So I continued self-publishing my books. At the time, I was still looking for a literary agent, wasn't able to find a literary agent. My page grew. I went from 20 to 50,000 to 100,000 to 200,000, 300,000. Now I'm on 500,000 followers on Instagram alone. And then I finally published my most successful book, which was Dear Self, which is a bite-sized self-help book. So it's got the same pieces that I share online about like self-love, self-worth, grief, love, heartbreak, a lot of it. But then it's also chapters and chapters of a narrative as well, as you would find in a self-help book. Published it in the midst of COVID. Didn't know it was going to do any well because obviously everyone, we were all so overwhelmed with COVID. It ended up selling 25,000 copies in the first year alone. And I self-published it. So it wasn't even like there was no marketing budget. There was no big company helping me or anything. And at the same time, I was like, okay, I'm going to continue writing my young adult fiction book. The one that I had written at 21, at 27, I did not find it interesting anymore because my writing had expanded so much over the past few years. Started a new one, got in touch with a brand new agent, got a literary agent, and now I'm working on my self-help book, very first self-help book, like proper self-help, and my young adult fiction book. So the self-help book is a way for me to help other people and continue serving my purpose of changing the world through my words. And then obviously the young adult fiction feeds my ego and makes me happy that I'm able to be the novelist that I wanted to be. The young 10-year-old me can look up to and say, yes, I did that. So yeah, at the moment I'm doing like YouTube videos as well on the same subjects that I share online. I write articles, newsletter, mailing list, blogs, everything. I'm trying my best to spread the message as I can through my words. But yeah, my book, Dear Self, is probably the best-selling book that I've written so far, and the one that shares the message most about what it is that I'm trying to do through my words. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I know that is a fantastic story just in itself.
Thank you.
And how you've gone from your tough upbringing to changing your life totally, that you could have gone into that cycle that you were saying.
Yeah.
And inspiring other people not to break free of it and just get on. Amazing. So, do you see yourself as the next JK?
Yeah, if I wrote something fantastical, but I'm writing like, okay, so another thing that I really want to tackle in the fiction world, in the literary world, is the fact that firstly, women writers are so underrepresented, but also brown, South Asian women writers in the fiction genre are so underrepresented. It's true. The literary world is very, very white dominated. There's not as many people of color in there. So when I write my young adult fiction book at the moment, it's a book that significantly is prioritizing people of color. So it's a standard young adult fiction book. It's a standard, book like that you'd read by, say, John Green, about teenagers, chilling out, having fun. Like it's normal. However, it's normal from a perspective from two people of color, and that's what I'm trying to trying to portray. I love fantasy. I love J.K. Rowling. I love, and I definitely want to go into that. But I'm going to start it off with a little bit of like a romance, young adult fiction. And I see myself as a New York Times bestselling author. Like I see myself, making the billboards. And I always, whenever I speak to my partner about it, I don't say if, I always say, so when I become a New York Times bestselling author, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And that is the goal. The goal is to write novels, represent people of color, but also write healing words, help people on their healing journeys. There's just too many things that I want to do. But it's all at the base of it all, at the crux of it all is writing, content creating, and helping people through my writing. That's all it is.
Brilliant. So how can people get hold of your book?
My books are available everywhere at all. They're available on Amazon, the Book Depository, Barnes & Noble, Waterstones. They can be purchased everywhere. All they need to do is write my name, which is Ruby Dhal. So it's not Dhal, it's not D-A-H-L, it's D-H-A-L. So I'm not related to Roald Dahl. And yeah, they're available online everywhere. So because they're self-published, they're not available in the stores at the moment. But obviously when I traditionally publish all my next books, they will be in the store as well. But online, you can go everywhere: Amazon, Waterstones, Barnes & Noble, Book Depository, which does free worldwide shipping. They're available. I also do signed copies actually as well. So yeah, which can be available from my website. Yeah.
And what's your website?
It's rubydhal.com. So www.rubydhal.com.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Ruby, I'm humbled.
Oh, thank you for speaking to me today.
No, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.